Alrighty, so Killing Floor 3 is releasing next month on July 24th, and I'm pretty excited about it. I hope most of the Killing Floor fan base is as well. It's been a rocky road for Killing Floor 3, however, this video is going to be basically about all the changes that I want to see throughout the whole game. Preferably on launch, but hopefully by the end of the year. And this is basically just my own personal list, but this will also have a bunch of things that I'm sure the community wants as well. I've been a pretty big D1 glazer for Killing Floor 3. I very much enjoyed my time in the beta. It was buggy, it did have problems, but it was also a beta. And some people were saying that's close to the final edition, but I'm happy about the delay, because the delay means more content gets to get worked out, and we got a lot more things coming in. So, in at number 1 for the things I want on my Killing Floor 3 bucket list by launch, which again, is only next month, it is to separate the perks from the characters. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have already voiced their opinions on this. A lot of people want to see characters separate from perks. If you're a little confused because Killing Floor 3 might be your first Killing Floor, you got beta access, maybe you never played the previous ones due to other problems with the previous ones, maybe they were too old for you, whatever the case may be, the norm for Killing Floor over the past couple decades at this point, a little over a decade, or I guess over a decade, under 2 decades, somewhere in that ballpark, has been perks are separate from the characters. Perks basically refer to classes or I guess specializations, if you're familiar with other games like Overwatch and games like that, where typically a class typically has their set abilities. Killing Floor 3 try to follow that pattern of kind of having a hero shooter-esque type system, where the character you play, you get those skills attached to those characters and those characters only. Most Killing Floor games have had it so that the perks are separate, so that you can choose to be a firebug while playing an old man, or Bad Santa, or Darcy, which I think is the robot drone character that you can play as in Killing Floor 2. Killing Floor 1 also had the same mechanic as Killing Floor 2, where you could pick a character and pick a perk. Now, perks didn't necessarily come with an ability. Typically, it'd be like a passive type situation. Some of the perks shared passives that would be, racking up headshots if you land multiple headshots in a row. Stuff like that is kind of how like perks operate. Killing Floor 3 systems are a little bit different because there is a skill attached to characters. However, it is important that the devs have voiced that they are trying to make it so that the characters are separate from the perks, and they're planning on doing this post-launch, so this is something coming after launch. But IGN is having a live stream soon. I know, it's IGN, cringe, but Killing Floor 3 is going to have a dev diary, I believe, with IGN going live on June 7th and 8th. So hopefully we get an update on how that character slash perk system is working. It's going to be a little interesting to see how they do it, because characters like Imran the Engineer or characters like Devlin the Firebug, they all have abilities that are tied to what their character has equipped to them. So this is going to be interesting to see if we see characters have their accessories on their character removed and put on the character if the perk is active, or how they go about that system. But I do think it's a W change if they change this back. I don't care too much about how they currently have the system, but I know a lot of people do, so this is obviously going to be the number one that a lot of people want to see changed. And I'm sure that's no surprise. Everyone kind of wants to see perks separated from characters, so they get to play whatever character they want and whatever perk they love. So, there's that. So you can play basically Foster with a Firebug, or you can play Foster as the Ninja, whatever you want. Or Nakata as the Firebug, stuff like that. That's kind of what people want to see with this game. A large portion of the Killing Floor fan base wants this, and it looks like the devs are listening. So, that's my number 1. Moving on to my number 2 on the bucket list, I want to see more guns. I believe there was only 4 or 5 weapons for each character in Killing Floor 3 as far as the beta goes, and now I know it's just a beta, so they could already have a bunch of guns. They did showcase a bunch of guns planned. Does seem like they're slowly turning back a lot of the futuristic vibe, and they're kind of keeping it more origin based. So like an AK is going to look a lot more like an AK than an AK with a bunch of cylinders firing from it, because I believe a lot of people that were disappointed. A lot of people are disappointed with the way the SCAR looked with the cylinders and kind of it not really making a lot of sense to a lot of gun nuts who are very into weapons and very into how they work. So seems like Killing Floor is kind of reverting not reverting, but sort of toning back the futuristic vibe to a lot of weapons, and maybe just keeping a more original trait for how the weapons operate in today. So I'm all for that. I just want to see more, you know? I just want a bunch of weapons to play around with, you know? On launch, I would prefer there to be, you know, anywhere from 8 to 10 guns per perk or character, however they want to do it. I assume they're going to do it via perks, or specializations, I think is what they call them. However, I'm just going to call them perks because everyone knows what perks are if you're from the Killing Floor fan base. So I do hope they have a lot more guns. I don't really care what they are. I don't care if they're good or bad. I just want variety, especially with the way that weapon mods are going to be working with the game. I'm excited to see what the guns can overall be like. Only 4 per character is a little limiting, and I think we'll get dry very, very fast. So I hope by the time the game launches, there's 7 to 8, you know, hopefully more for each perk, but, you know, I got my fingers crossed for the more weapons. I'm excited. So hopefully they add more weapons. Moving on to my number 3, I hope that on launch we have the enemy AI work. Now during the beta, there's a lot of problems. You know, you had Skrakes glitch through walls, you had crawlers not really crawling properly by walking sideways on the wall, you had the enemies just staring at you whenever they got up close, which was a really weird, it felt almost like immersion breaking experience whenever you had like 3 clots in front of you and none of them were trying to do anything. They were just staring at you yelling. However, they have also shown gameplay recently where the AI seems to be much more reactive. They seem to be a little bit more motion capped, which is another thing a lot of people wanted to see. It does seem like Killing Floor 3 is slowly adding in motion cap. Kind of begs the question why it wasn't the first thing they did. Could have been funding. It could have been they wanted to cut costs and maybe save their budget for something else along the way. However, it does seem like they've added a little bit more motion capping given the gameplay they showcased and their updates on their Discord. By the way, if you're wondering, I've broken down every single change they've done on their Discord, or at least most of the changes they've updated the community with on the Discord. So check out my videos, you know, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Shameless plug over. But that's my number 3. I hope the enemy AI works. I hope it doesn't feel as sort of stiff and clunky as it did before. Another big problem I had were with some of the bosses, like the Broodmother. The Broodmother was did not work properly, feeling it would kind of skip a jump animation and would just sort of teleport down. It was super fast. Animations when it would attack were very stiff looking. Did definitely make it feel like a beta, especially with the amalgamation or whatever it was called, the alien looking thing. That thing did not feel like it was properly coded. So I hope they fix that problem along with the AI issues. So animations, AI, that's my number 3. Moving on to number 4, and these are in no particular order. A lively hub world. All right, this is a little bit of a off take, but when I played the beta, perhaps people watching this or fans of Killing Floor have not played the beta, as they did not get access to the beta because it was completely random. I feel bad for my buddy because he applied for the beta before I did. Somehow he didn't get access and I did, even though I applied like a couple days late. Really weird how that situation worked out, but I ended up getting the beta, and the hub world felt dry and purposeless. It felt like there was no reason for it even existing. So there's a lot of things I would change personally about the hub world. There's not a lot going on. It's very dry. It's very gray. You have basically a ship, you have a central area where the shops and everything are, and then you have a little training area where you can see your weapons, upgrade them, stuff like that. That's all fine and dandy. I just want to see more stuff around. There's doors that are locked, there's tutorials around the area that the game doesn't tell you to go to, so it's a little confusing. So I either want to see a more directed sort of quest lining to showing you areas in the hub world, or I want to see you know, especially during these events. Killing Floor normally has great events, seasonal events, like Christmas events, Halloween events. They do complete enemy redesigns and stuff like that. I hope the hub world keeps that same energy, and they'll have completely different, like, I want to see gore and guts hanging from the ceilings during Halloween. You know, during Christmas, I want to see, like, creepy looking snowmen, or, like, you know, maybe Krampus or something staring at me through an icy wall or something like that. You know, I want to see some crazy shit in the hub world to keep me invested. And on top of that, on top of all the flair and everything like that, what I think it really needs, and what I really hope they add, is progression inside the hub world. And what I mean by that is, there are games like Garden Warfare 2, like Dungeon Defenders, you know, little nitpicky here, little, you know, out of nowhere picks, but there's games that have these mechanics where when you do something, reach a milestone in the world, something will show up in the hub world or your sanctuary, and every player who now joins your game can now see that trophy, or whenever you log in, you see that whatever item it is in your hub world, that solidifies you did that. So, as an example, let's say you completed the hardest difficulty mission on each map. I think that, bare minimum, should reward a trophy-like item that would show up in your hub world, and you can flex to your friends, hey, I beat every single map on the hardest difficulty. Or you can just sign on and get that dopamine every time you look at that trophy and be like, yeah, I did do the hardest difficulty on every single map. So that's something I really want to see. I want to see, you know, trophies. I want to see, like, medals, statues, something. I want to see these progression-based items inside the hub that make me want to do stuff to add to my hub. You know, I want to see massive structures, or even just like a little trophy inside that little bedroom you have in the beginning. Stuff like that, I think would be really cool. I think it's very deserving if you do really tough things, like doing, you know, a kill marker, maybe 1,000,000 kills or something. Like, even if they made the progression system a very, very steep, large amount, I wouldn't mind it. But I do think hardest difficulty on a map should reward a trophy. Maybe you get them all and you get a very special trophy. You know, maybe the trophy is like bloodied and everything, and it's sitting in your room, you know, and there's gore and everything around it or something. I think that'd be cool, you know. I think it's kind of a sleeper pick. Moving on to my number 5. And that is the Z-Time noise returns from Killing Floor 2 specifically. That Z-Time noise hits like crack every time I hear it in Killing Floor 2.
Here they come, party time!
I do not play Killing Floor 2 consistently. I am a fan of the game, but I don't play it all the time. However, every single time I play it and I hear that Z-Time noise, it always hits that dopamine in my brain. I love that noise. It needs to be in Killing Floor 3. From the gameplay they recently showed at PAX, it seems like there's a similar noise, but the volume was heavily down, so maybe it's a volume problem. But it seems like they brought back the noise kinda, or it might be fully back. It should be fully back. That noise is perfect. Some people disagree with the way the Z-Time works in Killing Floor 3, how it's a build-up, so it's based on numbers of kills, damage you do to enemies, stuff like that, rather than the RNG sort of random effect. You would get Z-Time off of like a random kill or a random headshot, stuff like that in Killing Floor 2. I personally don't mind the change of the Killing Floor bar, therefore it's not on my list here, but the Z-Time noise, it needs to be that nice slow-mo noise into the Z-Time, you know. They've also touched up Z-Time a little bit, showcasing in the gameplay they did. They really wanted to slow down everything. I didn't mind the ability to move really fast in Z-Time, but the fact that they slowed it down, I don't mind it. I think a lot of people are going to respond positively to it. And I think Killing Floor fans are happy with it. So, moving on to my number 6. We have earnable cosmetics. Now, there is a shop system. However, outside of the shop system, I want to be able to earn skins, preferably by using said character on a high difficulty in multiplayer matches. In, again, another progression-based milestone. You know, maybe 25 multiplayer matches, you get a touched-up OG Foster, you know? Maybe if you're playing Imran, you get like a welder's outfit, you know, or you get like a welder's mask and stuff like that. If you kill X amount of zombies using you know, your multi-tool or whatever, right? Like, stuff like this I think would be really cool, like having a skin for Nakata the Ninja if you get trap kills, or melee kill based sort of progression. I don't mind any of these. I think these ideas are great. I think all these ideas would be perfect for earnable cosmetics. I understand there's a shop, so there's a risk they won't do earnable cosmetics, earnable skins, stuff like that, and they'll just leave everything to the shop. That is a chance that it'll happen. It is there. I'm kind of skeptical about it, but so far they've said they're not going to do the same sort of monetization they're doing with Killing Floor 2. And if you're unfamiliar with Killing Floor 2, they have weapons tied to a price tag. So if you want more weapons for your class, well, you're going to have to pay for them or play with someone who has that content, which is a W. But it is also an L having weapons tied to a price tag. And then also weapon skins tied to loot boxes, stuff like that. I'm okay if they add loot boxes. They just need to make sure they have a lot of cosmetics in the game, especially if the game's going to be live service. I get it, we're getting a discount because it's not a full price game, but that doesn't mean we don't need to hold these devs to a higher standard when it comes to how much content is in the game, I should say. Moving on to my number 7 pick. And that's multiplayer working. Multiplayer was a little rough when I played in the beta. You know, sometimes it would lag too much. Sometimes it was unplayable skipping everywhere. I hope we don't have the same AI problems, enemies skipping around, stuff like that were in the beta. This is obviously a hope. Obviously, it's been a couple months since the beta. However, I just wanted to get it out there. I do think MP is a very important thing in the game, especially for replayability, especially for those people who are playing with their friends, which seems to be, you know, a little bit more common these days when it comes to playing a game like Killing Floor, which is more or less a party game. MP is a really great way to get replay value, and I think making multiplayer work, great idea. You know, that should be like on the top priority list for a game of the sort of level of Killing Floor where multiplayer is such a heavy replay factor. And then, of course, I do think multiplayer, it needs to feel rewarding to play as well. So the whole multiplayer sort of scales with the bosses and everything like that. I think that can still work. For example, Killing Floor 2, I feel like it's fine when you have a bunch of people and the boss's health bar is like 5x, 6x, whatever it normally was. That feels fine. I do think some of the damage values sometimes are a little absurd when we get to multiplayer bosses, but that's kind of the point. I get it. And, you know, Killing Floor is pretty chaotic. I do just hope that the balancing is kind of kept to, you know, a very high standard when we're looking at multiplayer, you know, especially in high difficulties. I don't want to just look at an Impaler and the Impaler just fucking one-shot me if I'm playing with 4 to, you know, 6 other people. I can't remember the lobby sizes. I believe it's 6, but it might actually be 4. So that's just on my list. Number 7, multiplayer works, including bugs, including scaling, stuff like that. Moving on, number 8. I hope they add a lot more maps. Now, there's already been a couple maps confirmed. We're getting radar, we're getting a sewer map, we're getting a bunch of maps on launch. I think 9 is the total currently. I could be wrong, might be a higher number. However, you know, City Streets, Army Depot, and the Biotic Labs, I think is what the third one was. Definitely wasn't enough. I'm happy there's going to be a lot more maps on launch. Obviously, these all need to be, you know, up to code in terms of the grittiness and the feeling that they did with the City Streets rework. I hope all of them feel like that. One day, maybe they won't all feel like that on launch, but they've already reworked City Streets. It was a sort of daytime post, or I guess before the outbreak sort of vibe, where everything's sort of clean, sort of sleek, you know, you got to see the cars shine and everything. But they've gone back, they've redone that map, and now it is a nighttime map with blood and gore everywhere. Sick ass design. I hope they keep that vibe with all the maps. Maybe have like a few, you know, outliers where it's kind of more destruction than it is blood, guts, and gore. But I hope they keep that vibe. They did say they want a more serious tone as far as the narrative goes for Killing Floor 3. So I have no doubt in my mind they're going to keep the map quality pretty high. But I just want a large amount of maps. By the end of the year, I want to be looking at 15 plus maps, alright? Maybe that's asking for a little bit much, but I think 15 maps should be the goal by the end of the year, if not more, alright? So that's kind of my hope with my number 8 pick here. I think a lot more maps would do the game a lot better as far as replayability. And yeah, just overall positive changes. Moving on to number 9. Adding more enemies consistently. Killing Floor 2 did receive enemies additions. However, they were few and far between, and they were always the greatest. Robots being the outliers, alright? Not a fan of the robots. All of them. They can go fuck themselves. I hate all of them. Don't bring any of them back. I know we're in the futuristic world. Fuck the robots. I hate them. One of them locks you in place and you can't move, and your camera is automatically focused onto it. Fucking annoying as shit. And then the other ones just do like bursts of damage. Really annoying. Don't like them. So I hope we get good enemy additions, and I hope they're, you know, we have the Gore Fast. I hope we get the Gore Fiend. I hope we get stuff like that as we move forward, and even new stuff, you know, if they're willing to do new Impalers and, you know, the Gorilla hyped up with a tank type of enemy. I have no doubt they've got some creative stuff spinning up, you know, so I hope they keep the enemy variety increasing. Obviously not too much, like I don't want to see 20 different enemy types by the end of the year, but I hope to see at least maybe 2 common enemies added to the game by the end of the year. Stuff like that I think is kind of missed out in a lot of games. I think enemy diversity is really kind of what keeps players coming back to each level more consistently, or at least I think like that helps give a player a reason to go back to another map, or play another map that they've already maybe gone through every difficulty and they've played a shit ton of, but now there's new enemies that do different things on the map, you know. Stuff like that I think would be a cool idea. A lot of people don't like the fact that most of the enemies have ranged attacks, so maybe tone down the range attacked enemies. Good opportunity to add the Gore Fiend, an enemy with just 2 blades on his arms. You know, an upgrade from the enemy with 1 blade on his arm, being the Gore Fast. So I think those were great additions. I think keep it more or less melee enemies, but we'll see how launch goes. We'll see how players get to test, but this is just the bucket list so far before launch. Moving on, we have the last pick, and that is number 10. Unique perks that feel different. Now, I really hope they're able to make a lot more perks added to the game feel very different. I don't want to get a perk that feels just like the Firebug. You know, I don't want to get a perk that, you know, says Sharpshooter feels like the Gunslinger type of situation, because the Gunslinger and the Sharpshooter, they share similar perks in that they get precision damage increase, stuff like that. I don't want to see those overlap. I want to see very different, you know, perks from, or they're very different abilities and skills from different perks, you know. Now that we have a Ninja, if we get a Berserker, the Ninja being based around mobility, dashing around, getting stuff like that, I want the Berserker to maybe, you know, increase health pool, you know, gaining health from kills, shit like that, being a passive, you know, really cool abilities, maybe lowering the movement speed and stuff like that, maybe removing the dash and having it tied to like a new block system. You know, maybe the Berserker is like a futuristic Berserker and has like a force field around him, something like that. Just some ideas, I guess. You know, if we get like another engineer type character, maybe they want to do a mechanic, or like another perk idea being, you know, a tech specialist. Maybe the tech specialist uses a lot of different gadgets, you know? Maybe add a character like a chemist who their ability is they throw a elemental vial that's random every time they throw it out. Stuff like that, you know? Keep it interesting, but don't try to make one just a better version of the other one, you know? I don't want to see a character basically get a cannon on his back and do more damage, have more AoE, and last longer, having more shots than Imran's cannons on his back. Stuff like that. So that's what I would say. Those are my 10 picks. I'm really excited for Killing Floor 3. I do think I'll be grinding the shit out of that game. I love the way the beta felt, and I'm excited to see what they have cooked up in the dev diary that they're doing on June 7th and 8th at the IGN Live. So, with all that being said, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I want to thank you for watching, and as always, I hope you have a good day.